broadcast this webinar to YouTube. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I met Emilia Floro about 5 years ago when we were working on the Growing Up study that the city initiated back then. And since then, you all know me, I advocate for that lifestyle and that study. And then I thought I should reach out again and ask Emilia to talk about urban design, because I get so many questions, and sometimes even embarrassing questions, or at least the person who asked me is kind of embarrassed to ask. So here we are today talking about urban design, how it shapes our cities, what it is for the city of Toronto and different programs. And I'm so glad and honored, to be honest, that Emilia is here with us today. Emilia, thank you very much for being here. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Nam. It's a pleasure to be here today with you to discuss urban design, the profession that I've been working in for the past 30 years. The people that I've worked with over the years in both the public and private sector are passionate about cities and about making cities better for people in their everyday work. It's difficult to create a vision for the future without understanding our past. I know that we're all in different locations, and I ask you to consider the lands which you are currently on and their peoples. In Toronto, we acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. What is urban design? Urban design is the practice that deals with the spaces between buildings, the design of streets, boulevards, sidewalks, parks, and open spaces, and the buildings that define and frame these spaces. Urban design is interdisciplinary and is practiced by architects, landscape architects, urban designers, planners, urbanists, environmentalists. Work is undertaken at many scales. We work at both the small and large scale. We design at the scale of the element of the pavers in the streetscape and the building materials, the scale of the pedestrian experience, the scale of individual buildings, the scale of the neighborhood, and the scale of the city and its skyline. We all come to this work with different experiences and perspectives. I'll give you a bit of insight into mine. I was born in Lisbon, Portugal, and some of my earliest memories are of activities in the plazas of Lisbon's downtown, the Baixa, and my local park, the Jardim da Praça do Império, in front of Geronimo's Monastery, feeding the pigeons, buying roasted chestnuts at Christmas from a street vendor, and exploring Park Monsanto with my sister. Lisbon's downtown, just like Rome, consists of 7 hills. Steps and slopes are embedded in my memory, and I remember my father telling me, as we regularly went to Park Monsanto, that it was the lungs of the city. I realized later how significant that was, a 1,000-hectare park in the middle of the city. We left the city, the second oldest in Southern Europe, and we moved to a very different city. We emigrated to Canada to a new modern city, very different, but just as exciting and vibrant. The sights, smells, and street life of Kensington Market are some of my first memories, along with the colors of the fabrics and notions on Queen West and buying our clothes in Little Portugal on Dundas. Other fond memories include Ontario Place and the Forum, listening to concerts under the stars, and taking the ferry to Toronto Island, the Chin International Picnic, and the CNE, all events that we looked forward to every summer. The life of the city and many other cities that I've visited ultimately brought me to the University of Toronto School of Architecture, which was the beginning of my urban design career. The urban fabric of Toronto is punctured by great spaces. As in most cities, we have the fabric and the jewels. We have High Park and Centennial Park in the west, Rouge National Urban Park at our eastern boundary, Downsview Park to the north, and to the south we have the islands in Tommy Thompson Park. We have the river valleys that run through the city. The street grid creates a pattern of streets and blocks that defines the fabric of the city. And then we have the exceptions, the identifiable jewels. We have Ceremonial University Avenue that leads to Queen's Park, Spadina Circle, and now so appropriately houses the Daniel School of Architecture, Landscape and Design. We have our financial high street, Bay Street, that leads to Old City Hall, our commercial high street, Bloor, that traverses the city, and Yonge Street, which can be referred to as the Main Street of Ontario. We have Nathan Phillips Square, our City Hall gathering place, as well as Mel Lastman Square, Albert Campbell Square, Dundas Square, and Jurassic Park, just to name a few. These spaces are easily identifiable and stand out from the rest. But we can't have jewels everywhere. We need good buildings that serve their function and contribute to the streetscape and the active life of the city with doors and windows and active, interesting building elevations. When we're able to design quality environments for the average building, as well as for the jewels, we've achieved success. Urban design at the City of Toronto involves a broad range of work, including citywide studies and urban design guidelines, site and area-specific studies and guidelines, review of development applications to ensure that they're meeting city policies, implementing the Streetscape Manual, enhancing the public realm by building better streetscapes, and reviewing for compliance with the Toronto Green Standards. Our work also includes civic design capital projects, the city's Percent for Public Art program, heritage planning, graphics and visualization, and administering the Toronto Urban Design Awards, among other things that I may have missed, other duties as assigned. The City of Toronto has seen unprecedented growth over the past 20 years. Between January of 2016 and December of 2020 alone, over 500,000 residential units and almost 13 million square meters of non-residential GFA were proposed throughout the city. Approximately 90% of development is proposed in areas targeted for growth. Downtown, the central waterfront, the centers, the avenues, on large mixed-use sites, and in employment areas. Areas that are served by transit and that contain a mix of uses that provide for the daily needs of the residents and workers in the area. The city currently is approving more residential units per year than can be built. There may be a number of factors contributing to the difference between approvals versus construction. Digging deeper into this is probably another webinar topic. I'm going to touch on a couple of city building examples which illustrate the urban design guidelines process and the subsequent implementation and development that has occurred. In order to accommodate and exceed the growth targets, visions and master plans were and continuously are being developed for large areas of the city in order to implement new policy. The studies can be initiated by the city or by landowners. Public engagement and consultation are key. The vision is developed with the community and with all stakeholders. Understanding what is valuable and the existing or developing character of the place is also vital to the success of the vision. Identifying need in the community in terms of community services and facilities, the environment, sustainability, resilience, open space and connections, all are integral to the development of a successful vision and master plan. The streets that connect the area to the surrounding city, the block sizes that reflect the context and create comfortable walking environments, the open spaces and streetscapes that can support the intended population. The connections to transit and many other factors form part of the studies. City Place includes 2 new schools and a new community center. The site is 18 hectares in size, including an 8-hectare community park, and contains 7,500 residential units. There are open space links along the south side of the rail corridor, as well as privately owned, publicly accessible spaces. The heritage landscapes of the Roundhouse and Fort York are linked along Fort York Boulevard and Bremner Boulevard. Public art plays a significant role in the area and was delivered through the Percent for Public Art process. The West Don lands were an industrial area with factories and warehouses. The lands needed to be cleaned up, and they were located within the Don River floodplain. The challenges to prepare the land for future development meant that the site sat vacant for over 14 years, until Waterfront Toronto developed a vision for the area with the firm Urban Design Associates. The West Don lands was the home of the Athletes Village for the 2015 Pan American Games. The area, when complete, is envisioned to include 6,000 residential units, 9.3 hectares of public green space, and pedestrian and cycling links to the Don Valley and the waterfront. There's a new YMCA and George Brown College student residence, along with Corktown Commons and Underpass Park. There's also a new streetcar line along Cherry Street. The area is to accommodate 20% affordable housing and rent geared to income, with Toronto Community Housing opening up 3 new buildings in the area. The Motel Strip. The original Motel Strip area consisted of numerous long, thin parcels of privately owned lands along the waterfront, west of the mouth of the Humber River. The area had no public roads south of Lakeshore and no parkland or publicly accessible space adjacent to the lake. Prior to redevelopment occurring on site, the Ontario Municipal Board at the time determined that public parkland and the public waterfront road needed to be delivered first. As a result, 7 hectares of parkland at the water's edge were created, resulting in Humber Bay Shores Park, and a new system of public streets, including Marine Parade Drive, the waterfront road, were planned and built to provide access and address to the new development parcels and provide for connectivity to the larger area. The area now contains 8,000 residential units and numerously privately owned, publicly accessible open spaces, as well as a mix of uses to serve the community. The Golden Mile secondary plan area is approximately 113 hectares in size and currently consists of large format retail buildings. The area will be served by the new Eglinton LRT with 5 surface transit stops. New public roads, new parkland, and a mix of uses will all be part of the new development, and will make the community a transit-oriented community while maintaining and enhancing the employment uses. The new community has the potential to accommodate approximately 24,000 residential units, 43,000 residents, and 19,000 jobs over the next 20 years. A site and area-specific policy was approved in 2019 for the Agincourt Mall site. The public consultation component of the application included 12 public engagement events. The site area is 10.5 hectares in size and will contain an affordable housing component, as well as 2 public parks, new public streets, privately owned, publicly accessible spaces, 4,725 residential units, and approximately 36,000 square meters of non-residential GFA. Update Downsview is just getting underway. Community stakeholder engagement is being initiated this month. A vision for the area will be developed, with a portion of the subject lands to be regeneration area and some to remain general employment. City Council has requested that city planning apply the concept of a 15-minute city while undertaking the review of the Downsview area's secondary plan to achieve complete and transit-oriented communities, and that city planning prioritize the principle of connecting the existing communities with the planned new communities through trails, bike lanes, linear parks, pedestrian crossways, and other appropriate approaches. Parks, Forestry, and Recreation is looking at an integrated and expanded park network and active transportation corridors connecting the Allen West community and Downsview Park. The revised Downsview Area Secondary Plan appeal is looking at a minimum non-residential gross floor area of 1,114,000 square meters. Residential uses are encouraged to include the development of affordable housing and institutional housing, including but not limited to student residences, retirement homes, and long-term care facilities. So you can see that throughout the entire city, we're very busy and there's a lot going on. So it's been my experience that we enjoy being together and being active participants in the life of the city. In order to do that, we have to feel comfortable outside on the streets and in public spaces. Part of being comfortable is ensuring that we are sheltered from the wind and have access to sunlight, particularly if we are a winter city and we have to consider designing for year-round comfort. We like to feel the sun on our face when we walk and shop along our main streets and gather in public spaces. So as we're doing all of our major master planning, we obviously have to take microclimate into consideration to ensure that we have spaces that we want to be in and enjoy. I have a few observations that I'd like to share with you in concluding. All of the spaces and places that shape our city are designed. City building is a long-term commitment. The span of a career is short, believe me, compared to the ever-evolving, ever-changing life of the city. Visioning and designing are easy. Implementation is the challenge. And a collaborative approach with many different and unique perspectives is key to solving any problem. We need many voices at the table and many heads and hands doing the good work. Finally, we learn from the past to shape the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. That was fantastic. Just seeing all the plans. Okay, so we have a few questions. Let's see how we address them. So, POPs, privately owned, publicly accessible, open spaces. What lessons learned, which one is it? So I'll just read the question, but it says, what are the oldest ones and what have we learned from them so far? Or maybe you can speak to that program. Maybe you can speak to that.
I'm not certain which are the oldest POPs, but I do know that we use POPs a lot through new development, and they're not a means of replacing parks. We have our parks, we have our park dedication through development, but it enhances the urban realm and does provide additional space for people. And we see, obviously through the kind of development that's happening throughout the city, the need for public open spaces, and the POPs, privately owned, publicly accessible space, helps to augment that open space.
I had another question here about retail, the retail at grade requirement, and how sometimes the city is really interested in seeing retail at grade, and at the same time, especially after COVID, but even pre-COVID, sometimes it's just not a good place for retail, or you need a lot of foot traffic. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg, but with retail, it could really harm the pedestrian experience. So what's your thoughts on the retail requirements in areas that are not prime retail?
I understand the question, because oftentimes, we see a development and it's inhabited and all the residents are there, and we see that the retail at grade is papered. But I think that, as you see the kind of development and intensity of developments that's happening in the city, we're going to need more retail. People need services, and they will eventually, it takes a little while longer, but they will eventually be inhabited and working well. What we are seeing through COVID is the potential for other uses at grade, temporary uses. So, pop-ups, things like that, or galleries or other things. And we're looking at ways that we can connect developers and various organizations to look at using those space that might be empty, for a while, but to being able to use it so that it's active, interesting, inviting, and also serves a purpose, a need that currently exists in the city.
I have a question. I think that's a really good question about the 15-minute city or the 15-minute neighborhood, which we all of a sudden hear so much or so often in the last, I would say, year or so. But before then, no one really heard about this concept. So, I mean, as a name, right? Someone branded it really well. So maybe for the sake of the audience, if you could please cover the basics of what the 15-minute neighborhood mean, although it's self-explanatory, but let's go for it.
Really, it's an area, community, a neighborhood that allows you to get all of your daily needs within a 15-minute walk, right? So, that hopefully the schools, the parks, the cafes, the restaurants, the hairdresser, the banks, the library, everything that you would want to use in your daily life is within a 15-minute walk. And that's ideal. And, we know that many historic town centers, they are built around that, right? It's confined, the space is confined so that you can get around it very easily within 15 minutes or approximately that. So it is a good brand name, but it's something that obviously traditionally we've all been looking to achieve with a mix of uses in areas and neighborhoods, on main streets, all of those good things.
And there's another question here about pedestrian only streets. If the city considers to have more of those, and there's actually the question about pedestrian only streets, I think it's such a vivid debate because what, before I say anything, Amelia, I would love to hear your thoughts. Pros, cons, you want to see more of those?
Oh, I think we all want to see more of those. And I think that, the pandemic has just made it evident that we need to rebalance, recalibrate our streets. And, it doesn't mean that it has to be pedestrian only, but really the recalibration of the street so that there's more room for the sidewalks, there's more room for canopy street trees, there's more room for the spill out of the retail onto the sidewalks, which we know is so necessary right now. And so I think that pedestrian only streets are really great. And, we have a lot of history in Toronto about doing pilot projects. So we'll pilot something, we'll close it off temporarily, and then hopefully it'll become something that might be a bit more permanent. We close off Kensington Market for pedestrians only, things like that. So I think it's great. I think we need to look at more of them and moving forward. And I think that that's something that's top of mind in the city and elsewhere, particularly during these times.
And Cafio doesn't close the street for pedestrian only, but Cafio was approved by council to be a permanent I don't know, not solution, because we won't have a problem anymore, hopefully soon, but it will a permanent program in the summer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that what has been very successful is that we've been able to move very quickly on some of these pilot projects, right? In the past, it would take a long time, to get these things done. But luckily, we're able to be nimble and to move a bit more quickly now, which is great.
And I'll just explain, because I know I looked at the list and we have a lot of, a big part of our audience is actually out of Toronto because I posted this webinar on the Urban Design Group on LinkedIn. So I know a lot of people are from India and Europe. So Cafetio is a program that council initiated during COVID of allowing businesses to expand to the public realm or the street on the expense of vehicle lane, which transformed the city, like unbelievable. Like Toronto already, like all of a sudden became the city it wanted to be. Like I live downtown and streets like Queen and King transformed. I have no other word to describe it. So that is Cafetio. I Google it. It was a really good program. Let's see what else we have here. Well, that's it. Someone is asking if you could please hear about the big picture visions for the city. I mean, that you covered some of the most massive master plans that the city has. Is there anything else that you would like to see about big picture vision for Toronto in the future?
Well, I think that what I'd like to communicate is the fact that Toronto has been experiencing, and I stated that, but experiencing this incredible growth. But we've done it in the places that we think are important for it to happen. So on transit corridors where people can, can live and work and shop and get around and have those connections. And most of those corridors, those main streets, are associated with neighborhoods as well. So they're part of a larger neighborhood. So we see that we've achieved a lot of success in developing in these areas. And we are quickly becoming a tall building city. We are a tall building city, but we also have incredible mid-rise buildings that are going on along Kingston Road and the Queensway, and all sorts of different areas of the city. So I think that the way that we're developing and intensifying the city is in a very strategic, planned way, and it's working.
Emilia, we always try to be very respectful of our time frame, so we have time for one more question, and I'm going to steal that opportunity. Can you share with us one spot in the city that went through an urban design process? That, as you said, everything is built, everything is planned and designed, but one corner in the city that perhaps you even worked on in your career that you think is extremely successful, extremely proud of, that was your project, maybe something that you were in the approval process. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I thought it would be a good question. Your favorite part in the city? Come on, you're the director of urban design.
I love everything about the city. I love all the areas of the city. We need work on some, and I think that actually is a challenge moving forward. It's to ensure that areas that haven't seen the kind of intensification and haven't experienced the kind of benefit that comes along with development, that we really need to take care of those spaces and concentrate on those spaces. It's funny when you say that the one area that you've worked on. Well, we don't do things alone. We work collaboratively with all of our colleagues. So it's not my project or my city or my, it's a collaboration. But I have been, I've worked in different areas of the city. I worked downtown and the area around Davisville and Merton and all of those areas I worked on as they were initially being redeveloped with mid-rise buildings. And I thought that was a really great area to work in. Midtown, I've worked in that area as well. And I've worked in the West District, Etobicoke, York, and have seen the redevelopment of Humber Bay Shores and worked on that. And I use that as kind of a test case. And, Humber Bay Shores started out with the towers in the park. Then there was the theory of squash and spread. And there was part of that involved in the area and very little sort of public interaction with the buildings. And then the third phase of Humber Bay Shores, I think, is where we're getting to have that active interaction between the public and the private. And we've got the restaurants and the patios and the cafes and the grocery stores and things like that, and a mix of uses. So as an evolution of the processes in the city and sort of the different concepts of planning at different stages in different decades, you kind of see an evolution of that, which is interesting. And I've also worked on Etobicoke Center and really seen how it's starting to develop and really exploding kind of within its development context now. And my very favorite project, it's a long-winded answer, but my very favorite project was that I was able to work on the Etobicoke, the new Etobicoke Civic Center. And that was an international design competition with Henning Larsen. And I think that that's going to be a really beautiful jewel that's added to the fabric of the city. So that was with Henning Larsen and Adamson and Associates and PMA Architects that are leading that project. So I think that that's probably my favorite project that I've worked on.
Thank you, Amelia, for your time and for the informative webinar. And thank you for the audience that joined us from all over the world, which makes me very, very excited. Amelia, thank you again for your time. Bye, everyone. Until the next one.